The mid to late 1980s were a hard time for Squaresoft. Its ties with parent company Denyusha Electric had been severed, and none of its simplistic Famicom games had managed to gain any traction. So they did what any failing software company would do. They hired a guy who dropped out of college because of his Ultima habit and asked him to make an RPG to rival the popular Dragon Quest games. Fortunately for Square, the dropout they hired was Hironobu Sakaguchi, a man with little regard for human life and a single-minded pursuit for his goals, except for college. This tenacity, combined with his demon-like personality, made him unpopular among his colleagues and subordinates, yet faced with imminent bankruptcy, Square's board gave him control of all their remaining funds. He was their last hope. And thus, Sakaguchi began work on his Final Fantasy, a lesbian sex simulator of the same name. When corporate got word of what he was making, they were angry and aroused. They left Sakaguchi in charge of the project, but not without an ultimatum. If Final Fantasy was not a commercial success, and not an RPG, the man would have to repent for his disgrace in the only way traditional Japanese society deemed appropriate: by going back to university. For the first time in his life, Sakaguchi needed help, so he assembled an A-team of the 7 most ruthless Japanese businessmen west of Osaka. Incidentally, they were also the only 7 guys at Square who could tolerate him for more than 5 minutes. And so he put them to work on converting his lesbian fantasy into a fighting fantasy. Making use of blackmail, deceit, and intimidation, Sakaguchi was able to rope the rest of the company into working on the game with him. With the fate of the company at stake, and the lack of faith they had in Sakaguchi and his team, they had no choice but to comply. The deadline was harsh, but through tactful use of workers' rights violations, they were able to meet it. And thus, Final Fantasy was born. And then 3 years later, it was localized and sold in North America.